That night at the nursing home began like any other, but something in the air felt different, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was in the main hallway, holding a cup of lukewarm tea that had already lost its flavor, trying to distract myself as I slowly walked to my room. The nursing home was too quiet, the kind of silence that makes anyone uneasy. The white ceiling lights flickered occasionally, creating shadows that moved across the yellow worn walls. I was used to that environment, but that day, for some reason, everything felt heavier. Footsteps echoed louder, the smell of cleaning products was more intense, and there was an almost invisible atmosphere of tension circulating among the staff. It was at that moment, as I reached my bedroom door, that I felt a hand lightly touch my arm. I turned quickly, startled, and saw Mariana, one of the kindest caregivers on the night shift. But at that moment, her expression lacked the serenity I knew. She seemed nervous, looking around as if afraid someone was watching. Her eyes were wide, and her short breath betrayed that something was very wrong. She moved even closer, almost pressing her face against mine, and whispered in a voice so low it nearly dissolved into thin air, "Don't sleep in your room tonight." The phrase hit me like a silent punch. My whole body froze. I felt goosebumps from the nape of my neck to my ankles. My heart raced as if an emergency button had been activated. The cup almost slipped from my hand. I wasn't sure if I'd heard right. My first reaction was to ask, "What do you mean? Why?" But Mariana immediately put her finger to her lips, asking for silence, and shook her head, making it clear that she couldn't explain right there, at that moment. At that moment, a mixture of fear and confusion overwhelmed me. I wasn't in the nursing home by choice. I wasn't a permanent resident. I was there because my father, already frail and with difficulty moving around, had been temporarily admitted while we waited for a place in a specialized clinic. I stayed with him almost every day, sometimes even sleeping in the next room so he wouldn't feel alone. The administration allowed it, as long as I didn't disrupt the routine of the place. But that day, my father had been transferred to another wing of the building for tests. I would be alone in the room, and it was precisely about this room that Mariana was warning me. I tried to press her, to ask for more details, but she took a step back as if pulled by an invisible force. She looked down the hallway again, making sure no one was around, and repeated more urgently, now with tears in her eyes, "Please, just don't sleep there tonight. Trust me." The way she spoke affected me. It didn't seem like an exaggeration. It didn't seem like paranoia. It was as if she were carrying a secret too big to bear, something that could put her job, maybe even her safety, at risk. The gravity in her gaze said everything that words couldn't reveal. It was then that the surrounding environment came alive in a disturbing way. The air grew colder, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Some doors closed slowly at the end of the corridor, as if someone were pushing them shut without wanting to be seen. One of the nurses passed quickly, without looking to the sides, with a clipboard in his hand, seeming more worried than usual. The silence, which had previously been merely uncomfortable, now seemed like a warning. I didn't know what to think. Was there a structural problem with the building? Something wrong with the plumbing? A leak? A dangerous patient? Or something even more serious? Something no one wanted to admit. My heart was pounding so hard it seemed synchronized with the hum of the light fixture above me. I tried to rationalize everything, but the only thing I could repeat mentally was her phrase. It was impossible to ignore. It was impossible to pretend there was no danger. While I was trying to decide what to do, Mariana walked away, hurrying down the corridor, glancing back one last time before disappearing behind the nursing station door. The way she hunched her shoulders, as if she were carrying the weight of the world, etched that scene into my memory like a photograph. I felt a chill run through my stomach. That chill you only feel when you know, deep down, that something very bad is about to happen. But what was most disturbing was what I didn't know, and the fear of the unknown is always stronger than the fear of what has already been revealed. At that moment, I had no idea what I was about to discover, and precisely because I didn't know, I couldn't ignore the warning. After Mariana's whispered warning, everything in the nursing home began to seem different, as if I had put on a pair of glasses that revealed a hidden layer of reality. Walking through the corridors, which until then had seemed familiar, was now like crossing a foreign place, full of signs I didn't know how to interpret. The tension that had previously been only in the air now took shape, and it showed itself in every person, in every gesture, in every silence that was too long. I first noticed it in the employees. They moved around faster than usual, as if they were late for something, or trying to avoid being seen in the same place for too long. When they crossed paths in the hallways, they barely looked up, and if someone tried to start a conversation, they would cut the sentence short. Whenever another person approached, It was as if there were two parallel routines happening inside, the one shown to residents and visitors, and the other, silent, hidden, full of secrets. The doors also seemed to have a life of their own. Every time I passed by one of the rooms, I heard the click. The sound of the doorknob turning from the inside was as if someone were quickly closing it upon noticing my presence. And when one did open, it was only enough for a pair of eyes to peek into the hallway before closing again. That made it clear that something was happening, something that shouldn't be seen. The lights weren't helping either. In certain areas of the hallway, they flickered insistently, illuminating and darkening the space in short intervals that gave the feeling that time inside was oscillating. The irregular brightness created shadows that contorted across the walls and floor, shadows that looked more like people moving where there was no one. I tried to convince myself it was just an electrical fault, but it was strange that it had started that very night. And then there was the smell, something strange, bittersweet, like disinfectant mixed with something metallic, almost like blood, but not quite. That odor lingered in the air near the wing where my room was, and it grew stronger as I approached. I was already used to the typical smell of clinics and nursing homes, but this was different. It was new. It was suspicious, and it seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Then came the detail that unsettled me the most. The room changes. I saw at least 3 residents being hurriedly led down the corridors, each accompanied by 2 staff members. Some were awake, frightened, asking what was happening, but received no answer. Others seemed drugged, walking with difficulty, their eyes half closed. The doors slammed shut behind them with a muffled bang, as if someone wanted to quickly end the commotion so that no one else would notice. While all of this was happening, a single phrase echoed in my head. Just trust me. Tonight, do not sleep in your room. That phrase had a different weight now. It was no longer just an uncomfortable warning. It was an urgent notice, almost an ultimatum. And the more I observed, the more I realized that Mariana's behavior wasn't an exaggeration. She was trying to protect me from something I didn't yet understand. I tried to find Mariana again to ask for an explanation, even a small one, even a disguised one. I needed to understand what was behind all that commotion, but every time I got close to her, she avoided me, as if she were being watched. When I finally managed to reach her near the nursing station, she simply repeated, her voice caught in her throat and her eyes shining with worry. I wish I could talk, but I can't. Just do what I said. Trust me. And he left quickly, almost running, looking over his shoulder. The feeling of being protected fought directly against the feeling of being in danger. Part of me wanted to believe that Mariana was looking after me, trying to prevent me from going through something terrible. But another part, a darker, more restless part, said that perhaps I was at the center of something bigger, something that involved more people, something that was too dangerous to be spoken aloud. For a moment, I started to wonder if the problem was with me specifically, if someone had asked about me, if my name had been mentioned in one of those interrupted whispers. That idea chilled me to the bone. I began to notice every sideways glance, every employee who seemed to pay too much attention, every nurse who turned around too quickly when they saw me. The nursing home, which had once been just a simple place with its repetitive days and predictable routines, now seemed like a stage where everyone knew their lines, except me. And that was what drove me to despair the most. The feeling of being the only person in that building who didn't know the real reason for so much tension. I walked through the corridors and felt that something, or someone, was about to happen. The atmosphere seemed heavier, almost palpable. The noises, which had once been commonplace, now seemed like signals, the dragging of a stretcher, the creaking of a door, the distant beep of some medical equipment. Each sound made me more alert, more nervous. But what really struck me was the expression on the residents' faces. They were scared, and that said more than any employee could have said. Some seemed to realize that something was wrong, even without understanding why. Others looked at me with pity, as if they knew something I didn't, and regretted that I was still there. The combination of all that created a growing unease that rose in my chest like a wave about to overflow. I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. With each passing minute, the air seemed denser and time seemed slower. It was as if the asylum was holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to reveal what it was hiding. And at the center of it all, there I was, caught between the feeling of being protected by Mariana and the certainty that I was in the middle of something too dangerous to ignore. I couldn't stand that feeling of walking blindly through a place where everyone seemed to know a secret that only I didn't know. Every step I took down the hallway made the fear grow, accumulating in layers, like dust left under a piece of furniture for years. The tension was so intense that I felt my heart beating faster than my own thoughts. I needed answers, and the only person who seemed to want to protect me, or at least prevent something from happening to me, was Mariana. When I finally found her again, she was in the materials storage room, a place where almost no one went unless necessary. The yellow light flickered erratically, and the door was only slightly ajar. It seemed deliberate. She was alone, trying to take a deep breath, as if gathering courage for something. I called her name softly, and she turned quickly, her gaze filled with fear and urgency. For a moment, I thought she was going to ask me to leave again. But, unlike the last few times, she finally gave in. Okay, you deserve to know, but you need to promise you won't repeat anything I say, at least not until all this is over. I agreed, even without knowing exactly what I was agreeing to. My stomach churned and my fingers began to tremble. I knew in that instant that I was about to hear something that would change everything. Mariana approached, lowered her voice, and began to speak quickly, as if she feared someone might appear at any moment. His room. It shouldn't have been occupied. It should be sealed off, but it isn't. They want to hide it. Hide what? I asked, feeling breathless. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second as if reliving something traumatic, and continued. 3 residents became seriously ill after spending the night there. They experienced shortness of breath, dizziness, and severe pain. When they were taken out of the room, they were almost unconscious. They all presented similar symptoms, as if they had been exposed to something toxic. My whole body went cold. It was as if a gust of wind had run down my spine. Something toxic? Like a chemical spill? She nodded affirmatively. It was a leak, yes, but not of regular gas. Something stronger. Something that shouldn't even have been in the building. That sentence sounded like a silent thunderclap. I tried to reason it out, but the pieces just didn't fit. But why didn't they evacuate the place? Why didn't they call the authorities? Mariana looked around again, moved even closer, and whispered, because they don't want anyone to find out. We've tried to report it before. Nurses, technicians, even a former coordinator. Nobody listened. In fact, they covered everything up. They said it was paranoia, that they were isolated events. They even threatened people. Here. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The realization that something so serious was happening right before my eyes and being deliberately ignored left me speechless. But Mariana wasn't finished yet. And there's more. She hesitated, and I realized that the next part of the story was even worse. A violent patient escaped from the makeshift psychiatric ward last night. They said they found him, but that's a lie. He disappeared right near his room. My breath caught in my throat. It went dry instantly. I gripped the nearest shelf, trying to process everything at once. A toxic leak, a dangerous patient missing, residents falling ill, abrupt room changes, and, on top of everything, administrators who preferred hiding the truth to ensuring people's safety. If they admit they have banned chemicals in here, or that they lost a dangerous patient, the nursing home will close, lawsuits will begin, the press will show up. They don't want that. It was a conspiracy, the kind you think only exists in movies, but it was happening right there, in front of me. And where do I fit into this? I asked, already dreading the answer. Mariana took a deep breath, and at that moment I saw a glint of despair in her eyes. Because your room is the only one they haven't closed off, and it's where it all started. You were the next person to sleep there. I couldn't let that happen. Something inside me broke. The realization hit me with brutal force. I was inches away from becoming the next victim. I might not even be alive now if it weren't for her warning. But Mariana wasn't finished. I've warned other residents before. I've filed reports. I've tried to alert supervisors. Do you know what they did? They put me on the problem employee list. They said I was making things up, and they started watching me. If they find out I talked to you, I could be fired, or worse. At that moment, the value of what she was doing finally hit me. She was risking everything, her job, her safety, her reputation, to warn me, to protect me, and perhaps to try to prevent someone else from suffering the consequences of the nursing home's negligence. The feeling of being protected began to mix with another, even stronger one, the feeling of being in the center of a real, concrete, immediate danger, as if I were trapped inside a labyrinth where all paths led to the same point, the truth they were desperately trying to hide. So, why today? Why now? I asked. She swallowed hard. Because today's internal tests went wrong, and they need someone to occupy that room to prove there's no risk. And you were on the list. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It was like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Mariana gripped my arm tightly, almost in a desperate plea. You need to leave here now. Don't go back to your room. I know this all sounds crazy, but I don't want you to be used as further proof that everything is okay when it's not. The world seemed to spin around me. All conversations interrupted, doors closing, the strange smell, the flickering lights, residents being hurriedly moved, tense expressions. Everything made sense now. Everything was connected. Everything pointed in the same direction. And I realized that that night, the truth was much closer and much more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. When Mariana finished speaking, I felt as if a gigantic weight had been placed on my shoulders. The truth, the one no one wanted to reveal, was now there, naked, raw, and dangerous, between us. And although my body was on alert, trembling with fear, my mind still struggled to accept that I had actually been placed on the list of human test subjects for a nursing home that was supposed to care for vulnerable people. I didn't need to think twice. As soon as Mariana let go of my arm, I took a step back, and another, and another. It was as if my feet knew the way before I did. I needed to get out. I needed to put distance between myself and that place, between myself and that room. The hallway, which until then had been filled with shadows and flickering lights, seemed even more sinister now that I knew what was happening behind the closed doors. I started walking quickly, trying not to draw attention, fighting the urge to run, but my heart pounding too hard betrayed the panic I was trying to hide. As I turned the corner that led to the side exit, I heard footsteps, hurried footsteps, and for a moment I thought they were from the administration, coming after me after realizing I knew too much. My body froze, but I breathed again when I saw it was just Dona Teresa, one of the oldest residents, walking slowly, holding onto the wall. She looked at me, as if she knew something was about to happen. "Go away, my son?" she asked in a low, weak voice. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say I'd be right back, that everything was fine, but my throat simply closed up. So I just nodded and kept going. It was as if her eyes followed me to the end of the hallway, carrying a kind of silent farewell. When I stepped out the side door, the cold night air hit me like a punch to the chest. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to understand how such a silent place could hide so much darkness. I walked quickly to the parking lot, trying not to look back. But when I reached the car, I heard something that made me stop immediately. Sirens. The sound was distant, but it was getting closer quickly. I turned around instinctively. The red and blue lights began to reflect off the building's windows, creating a distorted contrast with the interior lights that continued to flicker. The police were arriving, and it wasn't just one patrol car. There were 3, then 4. In a few seconds, the nursing home seemed surrounded. For a moment, I thought it was a coincidence, but then I saw 2 employees at the main entrance, nervously arguing loudly, pointing inside and trying to stop the police from advancing. The scene turned into chaos in a matter of seconds. Another group of residents began to be hurriedly removed from the back, pushed in wheelchairs, some crying, others disoriented. It was as if an emergency operation had been activated. And the most frightening thing, none of it seemed like a planned response. It was panic. It was improvisation. It was fear. Some police officers rushed to the ward where my room was. Others entered through the main corridor with flashlights in hand. Nurses shouted instructions to each other, but few obeyed. It was clear that the secret had finally been blown. As I watched the scene unfold, my legs went weak. My whole body felt like it was about to collapse. I gripped the hood of the car, trying to comprehend how everything had escalated so quickly. That's when I saw Mariana. 2 supervisors were pushing her hard, holding her arms as if she were a criminal. She didn't resist, but her face was marked by a mixture of fear and determination. She knew what would happen if she spoke. She knew the price. But even so, she chose to warn someone. She chose to warn me. I instinctively stepped forward. I wanted to help. I wanted to stop them from taking her. But before I could do anything, 2 police officers immediately approached and intervened. The supervisors were forced to release her, and the expression of hatred etched on their faces said it all. If it were up to them, Mariana would have been, silenced long ago. She looked at me at that moment, from afar. And even with everything that was happening, she found the strength to make a slight gesture with her head, as if to say, "Go away. Don't get involved anymore." It was a mixture of affection, protection, and resignation, like someone who accepts paying the price for doing what is right. Within minutes, the situation turned into a complete scandal. Residents who could be evacuated were taken to ambulances. Officials were interrogated. Right there on the sidewalk. Documents were confiscated. And more police cars kept arriving. It was as if a house of cards had finally collapsed, the one the administration had spent years trying to keep standing. As I watched, the fear began to give way to another emotion. Gratitude. Gratitude that Mariana had risked everything. Gratitude that I had heard that whisper in the hallway. Gratitude that I had gotten out in time. But along with gratitude came another feeling. Shock. The realization that if I had ignored that phrase, if I had gone back to my room that night, if I had trusted the nursing home's routine instead of the instinct that ignited upon hearing Mariana's trembling voice, I wouldn't be there. I wouldn't have seen all that happen. I wouldn't be alive to tell the story. The truth is that that whisper, so small, so discreet, so urgent, saved me. It changed everything, and I would never look at the world the same way again. When I finally got into the car and closed the door, my eyes filled with tears, not just from the shock, the adrenaline, the horror of what I had just witnessed, but because deep down, something inside me knew there are people who remain silent, and then there are people like Mariana, people who risk everything for the truth. As I drove away, I kept repeating in my mind the phrase that would forever haunt my conscience. If it weren't for that phrase, maybe I wouldn't be telling this story today. If you enjoy true stories full of mystery, courage, and hidden truths, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This helps me continue bringing you stories that no one dares to tell.